Hello, everyone. Maybe everyone. I don't know if anyone's even there, but let's see. Um, Hopefully, there are some pubbers here uh, using this to replace the pub, which normally would start in another hour. Good to see you all. I have, oh, yeah, there was a fit sighting in the background. Thornall's here. Cool. Um, I have some lovely people with me instead of normal pubbing where I usually start by myself. Joanna and Josh are my co-hosts on the Fireside Discord, which probably most of you already know. And Eevee is our fabulous mod. Not that we've needed a mod yet.
Useless, I would say,
Huh?
but okay. I would say useless mod, but okay.
I think you're probably a really good mod. Just the Fireside is such a nice community. We haven't needed you yet. But with any luck, you'll get to banhammer someone soon.
It's very warm and cozy there, so no fireballs
Exactly.
need to be thrown at people.
Not yet, not yet. Jeroen's here, Colton's here, Kindles and Kicks, Darko's here.
Hi, Darko.
Good to see you. Daniel's here. Yeah, it's basically the pub regulars, but I'm expecting maybe a few other drop-ins as well. Oyster's here. Good to see you. Morton's here. Lots of Scandinavians in the pub always. I think it's the time zones are comfortable. So let me explain a little bit about what we're doing. Those of you who really know us know that there was once a Discord called the Grimoire. And Joanna and I were invited by the 4 guys who ran the Grimoire to be co-hosts. But that was after they did what we're doing now, kind of. There were 4 of them, and they chose and announced it live on screen, books for each other to read. And I thought that was really cool. I watched those streams. I thought it was really cool. It was really kind of fun and funny. And I suggested to Joanna and Josh and Eevee that we do that. We are lightweights, though. And we imposed a couple of rules, which are a little bit different than how they did it on the Grimoire. One, we didn't want to force anybody to buy a book because we all buy too many books already. So we came up with a list of 10 books each that we own, that we haven't read, that we want to read. And then we shuffled it, or actually Tori did us the favor. She shuffled it so that we wouldn't know who it was. So each of us got somebody else's list, and we picked one book. So we each get one book. The exception is Eevee, because Eevee joined and dropped out and jumped back in last minute. So we're doing a special case with Eevee. Each of us will choose one book, and Eevee will get 3. And she has until the end of the year to read them. So let me go through a little more. Pascal is here. Vero is here. Oh, look, Eevee is here. Mac is here. Everybody's here. Cool. So why don't you all 3, just in case someone doesn't know you, I think it's very unlikely, but why don't you each introduce yourselves?
I'm Eevee. My channel is She Was Only Eevee. I post very irregularly, but if you got recommended to the Spear Cuts Through Water by Matt, I take credit for it by extension and default. So
Eevee sent me a hardback of The Spear Cuts Through Water. Not that I'm special. She sent it to like 150 people, I think. But she sent that to me, so I had to read it. I had never heard of it, and I loved it. And it's all thanks to Eevee. Absolutely. Joanna.
Hi, my name is Joanna from the channel Joanna Reads. And I'm, as Matt already mentioned, a co-owner of the Fireside, along with these wonderful people. And anything else you wanted me to share, I guess, about my channel? Or
Yeah.
Okay,
just in case people haven't found you before, haven't seen you before. Who are you? Where are you?
I'm known as being a little assassin elf who reads. And I mostly focus on fantasy on my channel, but I read a lot. Many of you have noticed I probably at this point that I read a lot of other genres as well. I try to sprinkle in some variety. I've been reading a lot more science fiction this last year, a lot more backlisted fiction in general. And I also have a wonderful discussion series on my channel called Why Read. I've had all three of these people here in the chat on the show before. And we always start with the why read question, which is a lot of fun to hear the various answers. So yeah, just happy to be part of this TBR surprise.
Cool. Josh.
So I'm Josh. My channel is Red Fury Books. I read just about everything. Fantasy, sci-fi, historical fiction, crime fiction, classics. I mean, I kind of love it all. And it's one reason that I've pretty much never experienced a reading slump is because I read so much variety. I purposely read at least 3 genres per month. So because of that, I'm always mixing things up. And I just find it provides a nice mental stimulus when you go from like a chunky fantasy work to a really fast-paced work of crime fiction. It really breaks things up really well for me. So that said, the list of my 10, whichever of these people got to choose it, I picked 10 fantasy standalones. So I kept kind of a theme on my list. But yeah, I do read a little bit of everything. And I post about once a week. This is a rare time I didn't post this weekend because I'm on this chat. And then I was on Read by Kyle's channel yesterday. So 2 live streams I figure was enough for people to watch me on YouTube in 1 week. So I'll be back to regular content next week probably.
You're Mr. Popular lately. Getting invited on everybody's channel. Yeah, it's weird. My list of 10 is probably, I would expect, because it's one of the things I like about you and your channel, Josh, I would expect your list to be very diverse. And you said it's all fantasy. Normally, yeah. I would expect my list to be all fantasy, but it's actually 2 sci-fi, no, 3 sci-fi, 1, 2 more contemporary fiction or literary fiction, and the rest fantasy. So it's a mix. So the 3 of us, myself, Joanna, and Josh, we have a list of 10 books, which was given to one of the other of us secretly. So we don't know actually who is picking what. And I thought it would be fun if we start with, let's say Joanna. No, let's say Josh. Start with your 10 books. Tell us what your 10 books are and a little about them, maybe.
Okay. Well, one reason that when we started talking about this, I was very adamant about trying to keep it to what we own. As I counted this morning, I was curious because for me, I have way too many books on my shelf that I haven't read before. I have 76 books right now that I own that I haven't read, which is overwhelming to me. So here's 10 books that I own, so I can do a nice show and tell. And these are all fantasy books. So
I'll just say, Josh, real quick, 76 unread books. Those are rookie numbers. You need to boost up those numbers.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was also thinking, like, you're worried about 76, really?
Yeah, it's really too much because one thing I don't do, like you can see my wall of books here, like these are all the ones I've read. I kind of segregate my non-read books into TBR shelves, and just that I have like 4 shelves of it, it's just like too much. Anyway, yeah, I know it's just a weird thing for me. It I don't know, stresses me out a little bit having all those unread books. So I'm trying to be very disciplined about not buying a lot of things and reading what I have. So I'm
if you want to feel more relaxed in comparison, I can introduce you to my unread shelf.
A full shelf?
Pretty much. It might be more than 1 shelf. We'll see. I haven't counted. Thornall here says he's got 400.
Oh my.
Daniel says he's got a couple hundred. Yeah. So
that would stress me out. So
yeah, rookie numbers.
I'm trying to be disciplined and not buy books before I read what I have. Of course, I fail because I get a broken binding book every month and things like that. But anyway, I'm trying to do this, so it'll be nice for one of you to pick one of these 10 for me. So what I put on my list, I have Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. I haven't read any Discworld, so that's a possibility.
I just finished Men at Arms, like this afternoon.
It's so good.
So it's perfect timing. It's awesome.
The Gone. I loved The Gone. Anyway,
yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway, go ahead, George.
Second one on the list, I have To Ride Hell's Chasm by Janie Wirtz.
Oh, cool.
And the author actually sent me this. I was flattered that she would send that to me.
She's been doing that a lot
Um,
lately.
She sent me
Yeah, she's
all of
really-
my Words of Light and Shadow collection.
she really watches BookTube, and I think it's pretty cool when you have an author of her stature that actually, you know, hangs out with our community. It's pretty neat.
Yep.
Mhm.
Third book, Last Light of the Sun by Guy Gabriel Kay. So
Cool.
this was sent to me by it was on my Amazon wish list, and one of my viewers, I think it was Jacob, that sent this one to me. So I have been loving GGK. I've done a few chats on Joanna's channel about him, and that's one that I definitely want to read. Another one, this was a birthday gift last year, so this one's like 14 months and counting unread, and that's Fire and Blood, George R.R. Martin.
Oh, cool.
I really want to reread A Song of Ice and Fire, but I promised myself I wouldn't until Winds of Winter comes out. So I guess this is the closest I can get to that. Fifth book, I backed Sanderson's Kickstarter. So I've read the first one. The second one is The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson. These are really gorgeous editions. So I want to transfer that from the nondescript shelf to the Sanders shelf. All right, halfway there. Next one, I know Eevee's read this one. This is Cloven Hooves by Megan Lindholm. So I just read the Reindeer People duology. So I'm trying to read the
you
back
read both the
catalog.
books? I didn't
What's
realize
that?
you had read. I didn't realize you had read both the books. I thought you just read the first one. Or maybe
Yeah,
I-
I ended up going back to back just because it's really one novel broken into two. I think she just wasn't well known enough to make it one story, because it just kind of ends and then it picks up right where it left off. So,
so thank
yeah,
funny
but I
what-
read both of those.
It's funny when an author has so many pen names that they have to put the pen name she wrote the book as, but then publicize it with her other pen name that everybody knows.
Yeah, because she's not Megan Lindholm or Robin Hobb. I mean, her name's something
Her
different.
real name is Margaret Ogden, I think.
I didn't know that. I thought
Yeah.
Megan
Yeah.
Lindholm was her real name. How funny.
No, it's her other pen name.
Wow.
And she originally, I think she chose Robin Hobb because it could be male or female.
Mhm.
It didn't
Yeah.
sound like a female name, but Megan obviously did. And she had that one first and then became Robin Hobb. But she became so successful as Robin Hobb that they promote all her Megan Lindholm books as written by technically actually Robin Hobb. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Who
do
also
think
writes it
Lindholm
as.
is her maiden name and Ogden is her married name, so it's not completely.
Yeah, she's Margaret Lindholm Ogden, I think, is the full name. Yeah. Anyway.
Let's see. Next one. I have 4 left. I have some Ishiguro, which I know, Matt, you've been reading him lately. I have The Buried Giants,
Oh, cool.
which looks pretty good. And then this was another one of those surprises on my doorstep. Adrian Tchaikovsky's publicist sent me House of Open Wounds. This is the sequel. This is the sequel to City of Last Chances, of sorts, I think. City of Last Chances I thought was going to be a standalone, but this is kind of a sequel. But I'm excited to read it because I really enjoyed the first one.
It's basically a companion novel, but there is a little bit of an overlap of character. It's so good. It's so good.
Awesome.
I need to get to that.
Yeah, it's very good. And then let's see, another Kickstarter. The last 2 are actually special editions I got from Kickstarters. The first one is Sean Speakman's The King Killing Queen, which the only thing I knew about Sean Speakman is he runs Grimo Press, and I really like the work that they do. You know, they have special editions of works from the 70s and 80s and 90s, and I just, on a whim, I backed his Kickstarter, figured why not, I'll see what he's like as a writer. So, and it's a really solid edition.
I've heard of Grimok. I've never heard of him or that book. So
yeah, he's the driving force behind it. So
cool.
Yeah. And the last one might even be more pretty than the Sanderson special edition. I bought the Sword of Kaigen special edition.
Oh,
Dang,
nice.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really want to read this one. It's rare that I would buy a special edition I haven't read, but I'm pretty confident that I'm going to really like this one just based on what I've heard. So anyway, that's my 10. I'm happy to read any of them because I will read all of them in the next 10 months probably. So, but I'm curious to see whoever has me and gets to pick.
So for Grumpy Smurf, who is used to Alan streams, and Alan streams always start late, but I always start on time. Grumpy Smurf arrived late. That is Anitha. So the idea is each of us, myself, Joanna, and Josh, we picked 10 books that we owned that we haven't read. We gave that list to Tori, and Tori secretly shuffled the lists and gave them back so that someone is picking from my list, someone is picking from Josh's list, which he just shared, and someone is picking from Joanna's list. Eevee joined at the beginning, dropped out, and rejoined. So we're going to do something a little bit different for Eevee, but we'll do it last. So basically, each of us is picking a book for Eevee. So she gets 3, we get 1 each. And then she will have until the end of the year to read them. And the 3 of us will read the one we picked in the next 4 or 5 weeks and do another live stream and chat about how it was. So who is picking for Josh?
Oh, are we doing that now? Or are we going to go through each of our lists?
I thought we do like share your list and then someone tells what they picked.
Oh, okay.
For that person. And then
Sure.
next person shares a list and so
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense since it's fresh in everybody's mind.
Yeah.
Okay. I am the one who gets to choose for Josh. I got to choose your list. I'm like, and this was the hardest decision, Josh. I've been going back and forth since we decided to do this because I was really torn between 2 books on your list. One is one of my favorite standalones of all time, and that is To Ride Hell's Chasm by Jenny Wirtz. I love that book. The other book that is also on my, like, I haven't made a top standalones video, which I need to, but another book that is also one of my top favorite standalones of all time, Sword of Kaigen by Emma Wong. And I was so conflicted. For the longest time, I was thinking I would choose To Ride Hell's Chasm because I love that one more personally than Sword of Kaigen. And I just think that book deserves a lot more love than it gets on BookTube. However, the reason I want to go with the Sword of Kaigen, there are a couple of reasons that made me decide I think I'm going to go with Sword of Kaigen, even though I hope that you get to both, and it sounds like you will get to both anyway, is because Sword of Kaigen obviously is it's Japanese inspired, if I understand correctly, and you have such obviously interest in Japan and Japanese culture. The other reason that I think you would enjoy the Sword of Kaigen is I think it's much more readable and much more easy to connect to in some ways. It has an incredible female main lead character. The thing with To Ride Hell's Chasm is that I know you've said before that you're not somebody who visualizes what you read. I don't think, with very few exceptions, I know there are going to be people who fight against me about this, but with few exceptions, I would say that Jenny Wirtz's books don't work very well for people who don't visualize what they read because she writes in such a visual manner. She paints her own cover art, and she herself has said, "My books do not work well for people who have aphantasia, people who can't visualize things." So I think you would enjoy both books. I really do. But because of your background, like I said, going to Japan, and because I don't know, I just think that Sword of Kaigen, there were things about the book, I'll be honest, that didn't quite work for me personally. And then other things that I really loved. Like the highs in that book are better than most traditional fantasy. It's a self-published fantasy book. The parts that didn't work for me I kind of brought it down a little bit, but I still think that everyone should read it, and I think you would get a lot out of it. And you have that fancy special edition. So yeah,
I do.
plot twist. I'm going to go with the Sword of Kaigen.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I can't wait.
You have to read it if you have that edition. I didn't even know about the book, and I saw someone show that special edition on screen, and I was like, why didn't I buy that? I didn't know it existed, but man, that's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's so nice.
And I know
really
Anita says there that I'm betraying Jenny Wirtz, but I'm not. I still love, like I said, I love To Ride Hell's Chasm more than the Sword of Kaigen personally. But because, like I said, I think you really have to, for most people, they have to be a visual reader to enjoy her books to the full extent. And I know Josh has said he doesn't tend to visualize what he reads. So it makes me a little unsure if you would connect to the book to the extent that I think you would really connect to the Sword of Kaigen.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your thoughtfulness in picking it, and I can't wait.
Yay.
Nice. So for those who came late, the idea is each of us picked 10 books we own and haven't read. And somebody was given that list by our mystery MC, Tori. And one down. So, Joanna, what's your 10 book list?
All right. Yes. And also, by the way, I don't know, Kyle, if you entered late, but just responding to what Kyle said, I totally agree. I think that Sword of Kaigen, it had some rough around the edges things that I didn't really love, but the things that I loved so, so much. So again, can't wait to hear what Josh's thoughts are on the book. And as far as my list, okay. So the first one I'm going to go ahead and talk about is one I don't own physically, but my library has the ebook and the audiobook. Last time I checked, it was available. And that is Clara and the Sun by Ishiguro. I've been really curious about this author. I still haven't read a single book by this author, but everything I've heard about this author makes me think this would be a home run author for me. I'm on a long waiting list for Remains of the Day, so that's another one by this author I really want to get to. But Clara and the Sun is available, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait to get to this author either way. So very, very high on my list of authors I want to try out. The other book, let's see, I had another book. Let me think. What was the other book that was? Oh, yes. Okay. And then the other book that was on my list that I don't own physically, but I own the audiobook of, and I would probably have to get a physical copy, honestly. And that is The Three Body Problem. So that author is, can you say his name? Anybody know how to say his name?
Cixin Liu, I think.
Cixin Liu.
Cixin Liu. That is a book that many people keep talking about. I've been getting into sci-fi. I've been very curious. I know the adaptation is very popular right now. So this is one I do want to get to. In fact, my uncle last Christmas, he's very much an introvert and sometimes hard to get into conversations initially, depending on the subject. But he found me at Christmas dinner. He came and made a direct line towards me and said, Joanna, have you read The Three Body Problem? Because he loved it so much. He's very, very well read in sci-fi. And that he was completely mind blown with that book. So those are two that I do not own physically. I would possibly make a purchase for those two if they get selected for me. And I do intend to read them at some point, depending on if they're chosen today. We'll see. Next one on my list is one I do own physically, and that is Equal Rights by Terry Pratchett. So we have Terry Pratchett on the list again. And this is one that I picked up when I was in Australia last summer, and I just couldn't resist, especially because I opened up the opening page and I right away just thought it was very charming and fun and heard great things about this. I have read the first two books in the City Watch series, so I could continue that route in Discworld. I did enjoy Guards, and Men at Arms. But for some reason, this was calling my attention, and I didn't see, I think it's Feet of Clay. Is that the third one in the City Watch? I can't remember.
Yep.
It wasn't available at the bookstore I was in, but this one was. And so I just went ahead and picked it up.
I read Equal Rights earlier this month, and it was my second attempt at getting into Discworld, and I loved it so much.
Oh, that's good to know. Yay. Okay, cool. And then next one is one that Eevee actually gave me, and that is Donna Tartt's The Secret History. So I got this from an Eevee Unhaul.
Crazy annotations.
I still have all your crazy annotations. So it looks like it's been very well read. And I've heard such great things about The Secret History. I actually own the audiobook of this too as well. But I have I don't know why, I just have a strong feeling I would love it. I tend to be very hit or miss with dark academia. Usually dark academia is a hit for me. Some of my favorite dark academia books include Vita Nostra, and I enjoyed Ninth House quite a bit. Stoner, if you count Stoner as dark academia. But this is the book I think that everyone associates with dark academia. So this is one I'm very curious about.
Stoner is gray academia.
Gray academia. Okay, we'll go with that.
I don't think it's actually dark exactly, but it's definitely
yeah, you're probably
gray.
right.
Yeah,
well, it has
overcast.
It does show a dark side to academia. So that was why I was like, well, it does show some darker aspects of academia. So
yeah.
But this book,
that book is darker.
I believe you. Have you read it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I will say that Secret History has grown on me the further away that I've gotten away from reading it. And I'm like, all right, it's actually a good book. So
cool.
It's very strong about 15 years ago, I had a colleague that knew I was a big reader, and she went out and just bought me a copy of it. And just said, "Here, you have to read this. This is my favorite book," and it's very strong. It's really
Wow.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm really excited. Yeah, I've heard just phenomenal things about Donna Tartt's prose. And that's exciting that it impacted all three of you, that you still remember things about it. So that's usually a good sign for a book. The next book is a little outside what I normally read these days, but I'm so curious about it. I have high hopes for it. And that is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. This is
I
modern
thought you
fantasy.
had already read that.
I haven't. No, I haven't read any Mark Lawrence. I own two
Oh.
other books by Mark Lawrence that I still haven't read. But this is one that everyone keeps raving about. It was many people's favorite book of last year. I understand it has a really interesting setting. So I just went ahead and picked it up. I'm curious about it. And I know Philip Chase, actually, that was his favorite book of last year, I believe. And he did a raving review about book 2. So The Book That Wouldn't Burn, another one on my list. And next is, yeah, it's a very popular book, isn't it? So glad you loved it, Daniel. The next one is one that's been on my TBR for ages, and that is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. The only reason I put this off as long as I have is because
So good.
I know. The only reason I put it off as long as I have is because Jonathan Words and Time says that I really should prioritize book 2 if I start book 1. So I keep on wanting to wait and put them together, but Eevee's shaking her head. I'm afraid I'm never going to get to it if I wait.
Ignore Eevee. They are one book. You can skip.
Listen
You
to me.
can read the third and fourth
Listen to
one
me.
later, but it's a cliffhanger at the end of that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he wrote the first 2 as one book, and it was split.
He
And
did,
by
but the
the
second
way-
book is so tonally different. So I think
Yeah.
you could read it
Yeah.
as a standalone. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
do want to.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I love
It just-
Hyperion by itself.
It just doesn't
Like,
come to an end.
Yeah, and
You
it's
know,
very, but it's not like a a cliffhanger. It's more like an open ending.
That's how I felt about Dune. So I read Dune twice, and the first time I read it, I did not feel. I kept thinking this could be my favorite book of all time, except I didn't feel enough closure at the end, even though I know it was intended as a standalone. And my then boyfriend kept saying, "Don't read the sequels. Don't read the sequels. They're horrible. It's not worth it. Stop at book 1. Treat it as a standalone." So I didn't read on at the time, and I regretted it. And all these years later, I reread Dune, loved it, but felt the same way. Read Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, and felt so much more satisfied after I read
Yep.
those 2 books. I felt like, oh, I completed an arc now. So I'm
Yep.
afraid it's going to be a similar thing where I'm going to love it, but I'm going to feel like, I need to read on in order to fully, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. It sounds like I might land where Matt is, in other words. Now, this is not my favorite Hyperion cover, but I will say that a friend of mine said this is the superior reading experience because the format is nice and large. And this is a very special book to me because it was given to me from my Amazon wish list from Dwyer, Susan Dwyer. Is it Susan? Sharon Dwyer, yes. Gave it to me from my wish list. So if you don't know, she was a community member of ours who passed away last year. So in memory of Sharon. Yeah. And next, sorry, I'm taking so long. I'll try to go a little faster.
No, we've got time. I mean, we're not in a rush.
Okay, next one is John Gardner's Grendel. This was on my standalones list from last year, and it's a very short read. This was written, I believe, in the 70s. John Gardner, am I right? Yeah, 1971. John Gardner is known for being an incredible writer. He wrote a book about writing and actually read some of it, Tips for Writers, and it's an excellent book. And I highly recommend it if you're a reviewer as well, because you'll learn things about structure, about sentences, about good prose. And so I wanted to read something that he's written. This is very highly regarded. And I actually talked at one time with Philip Chase about reading this together. I don't know if you still would because he's so busy these days, but it's one I've been wanting to get to for a long time, and it's very short. Next one, and by the way, I think John Gardner died in a motorcycle accident, sadly, if I'm not mistaken about that. But then next is Mrs. Dalloway. And I know Philip actually, I keep mentioning Philip in this book, in this TBR, but I think this is actually one of his favorite classics. But the reason I picked this up is because a friend of mine said that it reminded them of like a feminine stoner story in a way. I guess because we closely follow a female character. It deals with PTSD. At the time, they called it shell shock. And I'm really curious about it. It's really short. I've never read from Virginia Woolf before. I love classics. I don't read enough of them. Thought this would be a good read for me. And it looks like Matt in the chat loves it. So yay.
I was just gonna say Matt King in the chat loves Virginia Woolf. So
And yeah, Matt and I tend to have very similar tastes. So I'm really looking forward to that. Not for
That's
the
a
dude
really
bros
cool
then.
addition,
Maybe
by the
it
way.
is though. But the funny thing is that I've actually heard more dude bros talk about this book than but maybe I follow more dude bros. That's a problem. But but I've only heard dude bros talk about this book, with the exception of maybe one female booktuber. And then next, this is a book. Well, actually, I'll go with this one next. So this is not going to get picked. I know it won't get picked, but I had to feature it anyway because I've been curious about it. A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. Now, the author considers this adult fantasy. She typically writes YA fantasy, but she said on Goodreads that this has adult themes. The reason I bought this, it was on a whim. I was at my local bookstore, local indie bookstore, and this book happens to be written by a local author, local to where I live, and it's a signed copy. So I live in a town with a river that passes through it, and so I was curious about a river enchanted. Sorry, this is book 1 in a duology. I've heard fantastic things about this particular duology, although I've heard some people say it leans a little YA, but still curious about it. I think it would be a fun palate cleanser type of book, even though it's a little bit chunky. Lastly, this last book is the one that I feel like everybody wants me to read. And it's probably going to get picked. Ship of Magic, Robin Hobb. Yeah. So I'm actually proud because I have quite a few female authors represented on this list now that I think about it. I have Donna Tartt, I have Robin Hobb and Virginia Woolf and Rebecca Ross. But yes, Ship of Magic, Robin Hobb. I need to start live ship at some point. The only reason I've been putting it off, because I know people are wondering, why the heck are you putting this off? It's because I'm in the middle of an 11-book epic fantasy series, and those books take me forever to read by Jenny Wirtz. And I'm really enjoying it, but because it's taken up so much space in my TBR, it's been hard for me to start other epic fantasy series while I'm in the middle of that. And the next book I have to read, Wars of Light and Shadow, is really, really, really chunky too. But I do want to get to Robin Hobb. I think Robin Hobb's writing style reads a lot faster than Jenny Wirtz's style, and that's not a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just saying they're different. And I just know I'm going to love this. I love nautical fantasy. So this will definitely be a winner, I'm sure, unless I'm like Tori and just surprise everyone.
And especially in comparison to Farseer, I think Live Ship does read faster even more than Farseer. So, like when I initially read it, Live Ship, I read all 3 books in like 3.5 weeks, which for me is really, really fast. So
Wow.
I did the same. They are chunky, but they do read fast. No question.
Dang. Cool. All right, Matt.
All right. So I am picking from your list. I got your list. This was, like you said, rather difficult. I am a huge Robin Hobb fan, as you know. And Live Ships is my favorite trilogy, maybe, in the whole realm of the Otherlings. Clara and the Sun is also on my list. And I thought, hey, if someone picks that for me, then we could read it together. Or even if they don't pick it for me, we could read it together. I just finished Men at Arms. So I'm becoming a Pratchett fan. And you've got Pratchett on your list. And I was thinking, even The Secret History. Like that was a flashback for me because I read that, I don't know how many years ago. And it was super interesting and something quite different compared to all of the other things on your list. The only one Well, there were two where I thought no, just like immediately. I just thought I'm not picking that, and that was Three Body Problem because I DNF'd it. I just, at least at the beginning, I've heard it gets better, but at the beginning, there may as well be no characters because the characters are so flat, and there's lots of science, blah 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 exposition, and it just bored the hell out of me. I couldn't get into it. I understand that it gets a lot better, but I saw that on your list and I thought no, and I thought A River Enchanted no, because I've just never heard of it. I don't know anything about it. I'm not going to pick a book I have no idea about. Having looked at all of those, I had to recommend my most recommended book ever. I read it when I was 20. And since then, I've convinced I don't know how many people to read it, and all of them have loved it. So you're reading Hyperion.
Oh my God. The suspense. That was so awesome. I loved how you did that.
Yeah, Hyperion. It is part of 4 books. And I'll tell you the story why I say you can't read only the first book. I was working when I was 20. I was in university. I was working in a bookstore part-time, and I had bought it, and I was at lunch. I mean, I bought it a few days ago, and I was at lunch in the food court in the mall I worked in. And halfway through my lunch hour, I finished the first book, and I left my food sitting there, got up, ran back to the bookstore, picked up the second book, and went back to lunch. Wow. Because of the way that the first book ends, I couldn't let it go. Eevee's a better person than me. I couldn't let it go. It just felt like, okay, it's just getting to the point where I think all of the stuff I really want to know is going to start happening, and the book's over. So I recommend you read all 4. Some people say don't read the Endymion books, and I think that's crazy because they're very good. Read all 4. I think though you'll want to read the second one right after the first one. I think it's going to be hard to put it down, and it feels to me like one book. I've read it 3 or 4 times. I want to read it again sometime this year. So maybe I'll pick it up now-ish if you're going to be reading it. Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, so you're reading Hyperion. Congratulations.
That is so cool. And also here's the little note from Sharon Dwyer.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It is the best science fiction book I have ever read. No question. And I've read a fair bit of science fiction, and it's just the one that stays with me. There's so much in that book. It's amazing.
It's my favorite as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just such an awesome book. So
okay,
good.
and I am on the biggest sci-fi kick this last year. So
that was part of it as well. I know that you had been reading more sci-fi, and I thought if you're reading more sci-fi and you haven't read Hyperion yet, you have to read Hyperion. Like all of the other books on your list are amazing, except maybe Three Body Problem. But Hyperion's the shit. It's really, really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm excited. That was so exciting. I love surprises, by the way. Happy surprises anyway.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So my list.
Spoiler alert, we know who's picking it.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. And I will say what I think was picked. I think it was.
I didn't know until this morning. So.
So this is Legend by David Gemmell. It's sort of a classic fantasy kind of thing with a siege and an old hero, and sounds really good. Everybody I know who I trust, including Josh, really enjoyed it. So I'm looking forward to reading that. Blood in the Mist. This is a pre-Tolkien fantasy. I included it in a video. I did a video a while back on pre-Tolkien fantasies. It's kind of a fairy story, but kind of a more modern story. It sounds really interesting. Like, of all of the pre-Tolkien stuff that I looked at, it sounded the most interesting to me. And it was written by a woman, which wasn't super common back in the day.
It's
and it's-
very good, especially if you have read or have any interest in Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. You can
I have.
tell okay. You can tell the inspirations
Okay.
from that book.
Okay,
So.
cool.
And also
This-
Neil Gaiman was inspired by Hope
Neil
Neal.
Gaiman has a quote on the cover, and I think he wrote the intro as well, like for every second book ever, but still also for that one. So I tried some of this author recently, a novella, which I really liked. He's crazy prolific. Last year, there was I think it was the Locus best new releases of the year, and he was on the list in 2 different genres because he's so prolific. Adrian Tchaikovsky, City of Lost Chances. I have heard this is really good. It sounds like something I'm going to love. I really enjoyed Elder Race, which was the novella, my taste test, where I tried it out. That's one. Eevee will like this. Vanished Birds. I have already talked more than enough about The Spear Cuts Through Water, and I loved it. And this is the only other book that Simon Jimenez has written, so of course I want to read it. This was actually, it's funny. The next 2 books were both gifts from Tori. Augustus. I loved Stoner.
So good.
I was
So
a bit
good.
slow in reading Stoner. Like, I think everybody else had read Stoner before I got to it, but I loved it. I audiobooked it actually, which was maybe even more interesting. And Tori sent me this one, and it sounds also like it doesn't sound like John Williams wrote any bad books. So this sounds pretty interesting. Alan has talked so much about this. Tori also sent me De Castell. Alan seems to be maybe the only person I know who loves it. But I think it's worth trying, especially since this was a gift. This is interesting to me, partially just because of the cover, Between Two Fires. I just think that's like such a minimal but well-executed cover. It's not exactly fantasy, but it's like medieval horror. A not at all booktube friend of mine recently wrote me and said, "Oh my God, have you read Between Two Fires? It's so good." Which totally blew me away and surprised me. I said, "Dude, I've got it on my shelf, but I haven't gotten to it yet."
I've been a little nervous about it. I've been wanting to read that too, but then I got a little nervous because one person I follow who is a medievalist said it was kind of not that good, according to his medieval high standards. But
okay.
But I could be. I mean, who knows? It could be really amazing.
Yeah, well, you and I are not medievalists.
Yeah, I'm not a medievalist,
so maybe we wouldn't care.
Probably not.
Clara and the Sun also. I recently finished Never Let Me Go, which was also a gift from Tori, and it was amazing. I'm still processing it. It's a book that'll stay with me for a while. I think everything probably that he ever wrote is sad and melancholy and makes you think about a lot of big things.
That's my style. I love that stuff.
You'll love Ishiguro.
Yeah, I know. I just know I love that author.
I read Never Let Me Go, and I just went, okay, here's a new author I've never read anything by that I want to read everything by. And I ordered A Pale View of Hills. I want to start at the beginning and go through his publication order. Little more science fiction, Left Hand of Darkness, Ursula K. Le Guin. I've read Earthsea. I haven't read any of her science fiction. And Left Hand of Darkness and The Dispossessed keep popping up on BookTube lately. So I picked them both up and I want to get to them. And last but not least, Colton Will Be Happy, Boy's Life by Robert McCammon.
That's a Matt book. I think you're going to love it.
Everybody who knows me who's read it has said that is totally a Matt book. You really need to read that. You'll love it. So it's on my list, and that's it.
That's a great list. Hard decision,
So,
Josh.
surprise, surprise. Who is choosing from me, I wonder?
That would be me. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
I love seeing your list, and I was hoping that whoever's list I got, that there would be some things that I've read, because that's always the easiest to recommend, is when you've read a book and you know the book, and I know you pretty well as a reader, Matt, that I could pick something that you would love. So there were 4 books of those 10 that I've read, which was great. I've read Boy's Life, I've read Legend, I've read Clara and the Sun, and I've read Left-Handed Darkness. So that was kind of my short list. And I think I mentioned I didn't decide until this morning, because I narrowed it down to 2. I took off Left-Handed Darkness from the list only because it's been so long that I don't remember a lot of the details. I think I read it like 20 years ago. So I remember liking it, but I don't remember a lot of the details. So I said, well, let's push that one aside. Clara and the Sun, I liked, but I didn't love. I liked it enough that I really liked his writing, and same as you, I wrote down just about all his books into my TBR spreadsheet. Like you saw, I have the Buried Giant over here. I do want to read more Ishiguro, but that book itself, I didn't love that book. So get rid of that one. So we were down to 2. We're down to Boy's Life. We're down to Legend. I read both of these last year, and I loved both of them. When I read Legend by David Gemmell, immediately, like, I sat down at my computer and I Googled David Gemmell books, and I typed out every single one and added it to my TBR spreadsheet. I thought that book, I just love that book. I keep saying it was the work of heroic fantasy that I needed in my life, that I didn't realize I needed in my life. It was so good. Druss the Legend. So that one was amazing. But Boy's Life was amazing as well. I read McCammon last year. He was my new author of the year, I think. Is him and GGK were like the 2 authors that I just discovered last year that I love. And I read Swan Song and I read Boy's Life last year, kind of the 2 biggest works of McCammon, and I love both of them. So I didn't decide until this morning because I had to decide today. I was down to those 2, and I love both of them. I ultimately decided that, Matt, I really want you to read Boy's Life.
Okay, Colton. Yeah, Colton will be jumping for joy right now.
It's a masterpiece. It's so good. I mean, it's a young protagonist. It's magical realism. It's epic storytelling. I mean, it's just a tour de force of, like, this is how you tell a story. It's so good. I read them both last year, but Boy's Life was on my short list for my book of the year. It got edged out by GGK, but I have zero doubts that you're going to love that book. So I hope that my prediction is true, because I really think that you're going to love Boy's Life.
I'm super excited about it. Like, I've recently heard, I think, Jimmy, John from Talking Story, numerous people talking about McCammon, not just Boy's Life, but also the Corbett books. And I keep it just from hearing all of these people gushing about it. I've just been like, I think I'd really like McCammon. It sounds like I would really like McCammon. So I'm super happy to be reading Boy's Life. I'm surprised. Colton must have dropped off, because Colton has been bugging me every pub for like 2 months to read Boy's Life. And it's now next on my TBR. So yeah, cool. Thank you. Everybody hold up the book you are reading.
And by the way, I would have, if I were the one choosing for you, Matt, I would have chosen Boy's Life for you too.
There you go. Okay, there's Colton.
Oddly, it wasn't one of my favorite books, but I still thought it was brilliantly executed. And I thought, when you talked about Something Wicked This Way Comes last year, everything you were saying about that book, I'm like, Matt would love Boy's Life. Like, that is written for you. You are the target audience for that. No, it's very, very, very well written. And I
was a boy.
Well, you were a boy. I think it's
I had a boy's life.
And I know McCammon's prose, he gets compared to Stephen King quite a bit. I think McCammon, I want to say his prose seemed a little more polished than King's. I don't know if that's a controversial opinion.
I don't think so. King can be sloppy all over the place all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a good writer.
He's a good writer, but in some ways. But
I like King a lot, but I mean, his style, like, Dark Tower is one of my favorite series ever, and it's a mess. It's totally chaotic mess.
It's a beautiful chaotic mess. Though.
Yeah, no, it's an awesome mess that I love, but it's a mess.
Well, I thought Boy's Life was extremely well polished. It had a very good, believable voice. And yes, the way he writes from a child's perspective, very believable, very king-like in that regard.
Cool.
And the way that, yeah, I think you're going to love it. Everything you said, like I said, everything you said about Something Wicked This Way Comes, I haven't read that book yet, but I keep thinking that'd probably be a good comp title for Boy's Life.
Okay. Interesting. I can't wait. I will start it this evening because I just finished Men at Arms, which was awesome, which was so hilarious. If you have been hesitating to read Pratchett because you think he's just a humorist, he takes on racism, gun violence, sexism, everything in this book. Like, he has issues in all of his books. There are big themes. There's stuff to think about, no question. And I don't laugh out loud when I read books, but I laugh out loud when I read Pratchett.
In Equal Rights, he takes on gender norms and gender identity, and he even makes a reference to Gormenghast, and I'm like, oh, I know that reference. So
yeah, no, his stuff is hilarious, but it's also super smart, and there's a lot of deep stuff to think about in there. So how are we going to do this with Eevee? For those of you who may not have been here at the beginning, Eevee sort of joined late or rejoined late, and each of us is going to choose one book.
Just say it how it is, Matt. I was wishy-washy.
She was wishy-washy. She jumped in. She jumped out.
In, out, in. We're good.
Yeah.
So.
It was funny. I was actually watching, I think, Joanna's stream last night, or one of the streams last night, and Eevee wrote a comment. It must have been Joanna's because she mentioned the TBR Surprise, which we're doing right now. And Eevee commented, yeah, I was wishy-washy and I canceled that. And I wrote her today and I was like, it sounded like regret. Would you like another chance?
I mean, to be fair, that's the story of my life. So
yeah. Do things, don't regret things you didn't do. So I invited her to come back. But because of that, we haven't done the 10 book list thing. And each of us is going to pick a book. Eevee has until the end of the year to read all 3 books. And then maybe we'll do like a live stream with Eevee, each of us, discussing that book. The only thing is I have no idea what books you have and haven't read.
Are we not friends on Goodreads, Matt?
I had 5 minutes to look because you're wishy-washy.
Just throw something out there. I'll tell you if I've read it or not.
Have you read Boy's Life?
There you go.
And Colton has been begging me to read it, as well as Kevin.
I think you have to read Boy's Life.
All right.
If you have the time with me, but otherwise, just sometime. And by the time you've read it, either we'll read it together or I will have read it already.
And it's a frame narrative. I know you love stories within story. It's a frame narrative. So
story within story within story. It's probably not quite as framed as the spear cuts through.
No, not to that level, but what is?
No one mentioned that as a selling point, and I'm very disappointed. Colton.
So Eevee is reading Boy's Life. I'm reading Boy's Life. What do you two got?
All right. I got one for you. So Eevee and I have a shared love of Robin Hobb. And we've been talking about the Megan Lindholm side. She's read Cloven Hooves. I've read the Reindeer People Duology. I know that her and Derry are going to read the Reindeer Duology very soon. But one I'm pretty sure you haven't read and haven't talked about is the book that she wrote with Stephen Brust called The Gypsy. And this is urban fantasy. And she wrote this with Stephen Brust. I think this is very early very early with her because it doesn't even list at the beginning that she had written any books. So I don't know if this is like her first publication or not. I'll have to look that up. But it's pretty short. It's about 270 pages. You see, I have a copy here. So you said by the end of the year. So I'd love to just buddy read this with you. So you just tell me when. Every month I kind of just sketch out 5 or 6 books, but I generally read 7 or 8. So I can literally fit this in whenever you want to read it. So, you just let me know and we will read The Gypsy by Stephen Brust and Megan Lindholm.
Nice. So, funny story about that book. I ordered it from Amazon because I'm basic and I'm a slave to Jeffrey Bezos. They delivered it because their delivery is poor in the rain. So we got completely soaked. Was not able to dry it out. It was that soaked. Had to reorder it. But yes, I have that book. But yes, it's on my list. I'll let you know.
Awesome. I live in a big building, like 5 floors with 2 flats on each floor, and we have all the mailboxes downstairs. So Amazon can't leave things in the rain, like unless they just don't even bother to come into the building. But the great trick with Amazon is a book that's about this thick. They will stick it in my mailbox. My mailbox has a slit in it at the top that's about this big, and it's vertical. It's a vertical mailbox. So the only way you can get a book like this into it is if you bend it in half, and they do.
Oh, that's so irritating.
It's super irritating. Oh my God.
Ugh.
Amazon delivery ranges from the guy rings my doorbell, like comes all the way up to my floor, rings my doorbell, waits and hands it to me, to they fold it and put it in my mailbox. It's
Did they let you do feedback in email? Because on Amazon here, I always get an email asking to rate the delivery.
I don't want more emails, but as soon as I get a folded book, and it's happened more than once, I write them and say, I want a refund. And they, for a small book, they just send me a new one.
Mm.
They don't want me to send the bent one back. They're not going to use it. So they just send me a new one.
You should also be able to do delivery instructions, by the way. So I know it's a pain in the butt. They should know by default to take care of a package, but
Yep.
Yep, I agree.
Okay. Joanna.
My turn. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is tough. I actually have a couple of ideas that come to mind. The first one is going to be Mercedes Lackey. Have you read the Heroes trilogy or any of it?
I have not. Derry, you and Derry are two that are like, you need to read it. You would love it.
Yeah. So I was thinking about that because so here's the thing. I know that this came up a little bit in Why Read yesterday. It was written for a younger audience. I know that Bridger told me that originally that series was marketed to middle grade. But I thought it's still so cozy and whimsical, and it gives me big time. It gives me what's the name of the series that you love? The
Winter Night.
Winter Night trilogy vibes. It gives me Winter Night trilogy vibes, and especially with the emphasis on horses. That's why I think it should be an Eevee read. So that's why I want to go with that. But if you want a standalone, so I guess the question is standalone versus series. I want you to decide that first, because if it were a standalone, I had another idea for you.
I prefer standalones, so I don't have to be roped into another series.
But the standalone I have in mind is huge. So I don't know if you want to read that.
I have until the end of the year, and
it's called.
So are we getting back at the end of the year?
It's called the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It's one book.
Well, I was going to ask you, have you ever read 11/22/63 by Stephen King?
I have not.
I'm nervous, but I kind of want to recommend that because it's one of my favorite standalones.
It's my favorite Stephen King book.
It's so good. I think it's good.
I've heard that from numerous Stephen King fans who know plenty of his work. So
it's his best ending for sure.
It's on my list as well.
I mean, to be fair, from what I've heard, and it's a low bar for a good Stephen King ending, right?
Yeah, that's not his strength. Yeah, that's true.
No, I love Pet Sematary. I love Pet Sematary on just about as high a level too. So that would also be, gosh, it's sometimes I'm almost tempted with Pet Cemetery instead, but I'll go with 11/22/63 because I always want to recommend that to people. And usually why I don't, the only thing that holds me back from recommending it to people is if they're not like Matt, I would be hesitant because you don't live in the US or haven't grown up in. Did you ever live in the US, by the way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah, I was born in Washington D.C. and I was in America until I was 9, and then I went back and I was in university in America. So yeah, no,
Oh, okay.
I know American culture enough. I know all about JFK and the conspiracies and all of that sort of stuff. So I want to read 11/22/63.
Oh, gosh.
for sure.
Okay. Yeah. It's so good. So I do recommend it if you are familiar with that history and have any interest in it. I just thought it was brilliant. It was a brilliant book to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
And Josh loves it. So I guess I'll go with that. I'm scared. I'm scared she's going to hate it though. Because Eevee, I know your taste is very particular. So.
And I've had a checkered past with Stephen King, so I loved The Green Mile.
Gosh, maybe I should recommend Pet Cemetery instead then. I don't know. The only thing that holds me back from it is I know some people are very hit or miss about the romance because there is a romance in the book. Hi, Fitz.
In Pet Cemetery or in
No, well, there's a marriage in Pet Cemetery, but there's a romance in 11/22/63. And I know some people just don't like that element to it at all. And it makes them not like the book as much. But I still love the book. Gosh, I'm sorry. I didn't know I was going to choose a book for you today.
Nah, well, it was literally last minute. So
It was very last minute.
We'll give it a shot. But I hope you don't give up on Stephen King after that if you don't like it.
Okay.
Well, it's meant to be one of his best things. So if you don't like it, then you probably should give up on Stephen King.
Well, maybe you're right. It's different though. It's different. And it has time travel. It's sci-fi. So
Anita is correct. I am a big romance reader now, considering I read 4 Emily Henry books in 8 days.
But it doesn't have a good romance, is what I'm saying. Like, I love romance too. I love a good romantic subplot in my stories, but the romance, it's not why I read it. Like, I didn't feel like the chemistry was, it's off the charts. It was sweet. I thought it was sweet.
Yeah. Nice.
But I don't think it's like what you read for the romance. I read it more because I had to know what was going to happen at 11/22/63. Like, the suspense killed me. Like, I woke up in the middle of the night thinking, I have to know what's going to happen next. Like, that's how much I was into the book.
Is it pretty fast paced for like a huge book or okay?
Yeah, I thought so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've heard people say that like for a book as chunky as it is, it reads very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, King's writing, his prose style is not complex, or you have to stop every 5 minutes to think about it or anything like that. It's like page turner.
Yes. Yep. That's your favorite King, right? Right, Josh? Is that your favorite King?
It is. Yeah, that's my favorite. It's my favorite. It's my favorite ending. I also read it when I lived in Dallas. So knowing so much of the locations added to the experience for me. But no, it's just a beautiful book.
Did you go sit on the grassy knoll and read it there, or?
No, but anytime somebody visited me in Dallas, they had to see the grassy knoll and the JFK Museum, and
I've been there.
All of that. So yeah, it's actually a pretty great little museum up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they put the museum where the book depository, so you can literally that corner where Oswald shot, they literally have it set up like it was set up the day that he killed Kennedy. So yeah, it's quite good. And then there's a conspiracy museum across the street. So
of course. The day he allegedly killed Kennedy.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
Where I'm sure they talk about the magic bullet. So
they certainly do.
Exactly. I went to the Alien Conspiracy Museum in Roswell, New Mexico.
Oh, I've been there too. Cool. Yeah.
Super cheesy.
It is so cheesy. Yeah.
Unbelievable. But it was worth it for the souvenir shop.
The souvenir shop. I remember getting like the flattened coin machine and all that, where you can get an
I've got a friend who's into all the conspiracy theories and stuff, and I bought him all sorts of junk in the souvenir shop.
It's been a while since I've been to that museum, but the last time I went, I thought this place looks like it hasn't changed in like 2 decades. Like it
Yep.
felt so old and so
Yep.
retro.
Yep. Exactly. Somebody put it up in the 50s or 60s, and
Hmm.
Jerome wants to go there. Totally into UFOs. You need to move to America, Jerome.
Yep.
Holland, Netherlands is not really land of the UFOs as far as I know. Huh? If there was a conspiracy museum in my country, I would move inside and never leave. Okay.
I feel like
Yeah.
I'm gonna regret my choice, Evie. I feel like
No.
I
Don't
hope you
second
like
guess
it.
No.
yourself.
Okay. Because I could think if I thought about it for longer, I'm sure I would have.
I'm gonna go into it with good faith because it's a Joanna recommendation, and you think I will like it.
And then
So
you're gonna be like, I'm never gonna read another book Joanna recommends again.
Nor
I hope
will I
you love
ever
it.
talk to Joanna again.
Oh. It was very special for me though, because for a few reasons. One is because my mother is old enough to remember exactly where she was the day she heard about JFK, and when she talks about what that event was like it's kind of like I guess my generation's 9/11, where you remember exactly where you were when you heard the news about it. And then the second reason it was so powerful to me is because it was during lockdown in 2020 when I read it, and I was just thinking about how everyone was talking about going back to normal. Everybody was talking about that conversation, and it got me thinking when I was reading the book and going back to the 50s and 60s, how much America has changed over the last few decades and how much we idealized the 50s, but Stephen King is such a master at not romanticizing the past. And I think that's my favorite way when time travel is explored in a way that you show the good parts, but you show the non-romanticized parts. You show the parts that we're glad to have left behind. And that maybe even though things might get worse before they get better again, maybe we need to go through those challenging times. So it got the wheels of my mind spinning in that direction too.
nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, other than like I've heard about the romance aspect, and I've heard about like it deals with JFK and time travel. Other than that, I have no idea what the book is about. Like, no idea.
Yeah, Time Travel Cafe. It's pretty cool. I love time travel, so yeah.
I've never heard anyone talk about it who didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
No
know
pressure.
people who did not love it, but liked it.
yeah.
So that's what I'm afraid. Evie might be one of those that might not love it on the level I did, but I'm hoping you'll at least like it a lot.
Listen, no one can love Spear Cuts Through Water as much as I do.
It's true.
That's
It
true.
won't be on that level.
That's true. You have unique rights to that.
Another book you might want to check out, and I won't recommend this since I already gave you my recommendation, but another book that I think that you would appreciate is two other books come to mind. One is The Neverending Story by Michael Ende. And I think you would appreciate that because I actually thought a lot about The Neverending Story when I read Spear Cuts Through Water, because it does a very similar breaking the fourth wall or third wall. Is it third? I always forget if it's third wall or
Fourth
fourth
wall.
wall. Thank you. Breaking the fourth wall kind of structure, story within a story, allegory, story within the frame narrative. And then it also has a big, massive talking tortoise, not a stinking one, but it has a massive tortoise. And it also, the other book that comes to mind as one that I might kick myself for not recommending to you is The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. That was one that I read thanks to Jimmy's recommendation.
Although I would recommend Cloud Atlas first.
I want to read that too.
Cloud Atlas is so good. It's
maybe
so good.
Maybe we should read Cloud Atlas together.
It's unique. It's unique. It's a really unique structure. I think knowing how much you love Spear, I think you would love Cloud Atlas, Eevee.
It sounds like a Hyperion kind of story too, right? Because it has a lot of different narratives.
No, I mean the thing Hyperion, the first book of Hyperion is basically the Canterbury Tales.
Which I haven't read.
It's a bunch of people traveling together, and while they're traveling together, they tell each other their stories, how they got to where they are. So there's a narrative, there's the now narrative, and then there's each character's past narrative. And Cloud Atlas is a whole bunch of different stories that happen in different time periods, like vastly different time periods. And a really bizarre structure. Like roughly the structure is you get the beginning of all of the stories at the beginning, and then you get the end of all the stories at the end. But you get like story A, the beginning, and you don't get the end of story A until the end of the book. Kind of thing. It's just like how the stories are told, and that they're all in different time periods with different characters which have connections, but you know, it's really, really interesting. Just Spear Cuts Through
Joanna,
Water is the book that made me think of Cloud Atlas the most, just structurally. Like the story wise, there isn't much in
Sorry,
common.
I'm so distracted by Fitz behind you. She's being adorable.
Oh my goodness, you're so cute, Fitz. What a ham.
How you doing? Yeah, she's a sweetie. Yeah, it could be Chadia. I haven't read Bone Clocks. She says it's an easier entry, but I don't think Eevee needs easy.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, sometimes my brain just likes to shut up. Again, I read 4 romance books this month.
Yeah, but your favorite book of all time is Spear Cuts Through Water.
It's not that hard.
A lot of people DNF'd it because they said it was too hard. I don't agree. I don't agree.
I do think
I don't think it was hard at all. But
well, for me, and this could have been sleep deprivation, I did find the first quote, like 25 pages, a little hard to feel grounded in the story, and I ended up rereading the first 25 pages. But I mean, I don't think it's hard, and it comes together
you got to get used to it. It's just like any narrative, like.
Yeah, it's being told in a very particular way, which isn't the way everyone's used to. It's not very common. It's kind of unique in a lot of ways. So yeah. But
agree.
yeah, no, I think I haven't read Bone Clocks, so I don't know about Bone Clocks. But
So the Bone Clocks is absolutely incredible because we follow it a long timeline of the course of over 50 years. We go through the different decades in time and follow different characters in different decades, told in first person narration. And it starts out with a girl in the 1980s in England who ends up running away from home after an inciting incident. And this ends up having repercussions for lives thereafter. And it's so neat to see the way everything connects together. So I really loved it. Even though it's not a time travel story, it goes through time, it experiences time. And I think that Mitchell is a genius at bringing forth like the details, the richness of culture and history and location to inform the characters in each decade, while at the same time each character feels like they're their own person, they're their own voice. Like they're a product of their culture and surroundings, but they feel like real people. They just come off the page. His character work is phenomenal. The one challenge I have with it is that there is a fantasy aspect to the story, and it's important, and it does integrate all these stories, and at the same time, the way it's explained at the end is very rushed. I felt like the execution of how the fantasy mystery elements are explained at the end, it didn't quite work for me as much at the end. But otherwise, I thought it was just such a brilliant book. And I was so addicted to the experience of reading it.
Okay, cool.
Well, since I have alternate picks from Joanna and Matt, Josh, no pressure. If you want to provide an alternate pick.
Actually, I had thought, how much Neil Gaiman have you read? Did you read Ocean at the End of the Lane?
I've read no Neil Gaiman.
What?
Okay, well, there's my alternate pick. The Ocean at the End of the Lane is.
Oh my goodness! Yes.
Was 2 years ago one of my top books of the year, and
yeah,
I've only read 2 by Gaiman, but I'll definitely be reading probably everything by him eventually. But he's also standalone, so it works really well. But that one was just like one of the most surprisingly incredible books I've read that year. because I didn't think much of it because it's like a little thin thing, and I thought it was just going to be this whimsical little tale. But man, it was so good.
From what I have heard about both Ocean at the End of the Lane and Boy's Life, there's that common thread of like this coming of age aspect of both of them.
Yeah,
very much so.
It would be interesting.
They're very similar in that way, where they're told from the adult perspective of the man when he's older, and kind of going back in time to when he's young again, and kind of playing out
Yeah,
that story.
I read Ocean at the End of the Lane the same year that Fairy Tale by Stephen King came out, and I said this is the story that I had hoped Fairy Tale would have been.
Yeah,
And that's as a King super fan.
everybody that had anything to say about Fairy Tale just said, yeah. I had pre-ordered it, and luckily because I'm in Germany, the pre-order takes a lot longer to be delivered. And I saw like 3 reviews back to back, yours, Mike's, and someone else's, and all of them said, yeah, and they got it on release day, really excited, and everybody was like, yeah. And then I canceled my pre-order. I was like,
the first part of the book was excellent. The first part, he gets stuck with this slice of life narrative that he started with. A guy with so good. It started off so good, so much promise, and then once we went to the portal,
I actually wanted to say what DK Moon said. The best thing Gaiman ever wrote is the Sandman comics, but I'm not going to recommend to Eevee that she go out and try and find all of the Sandman comics.
Yeah, Joanna, I found it so interesting that all of us had pretty much the same take on Fairy Tale. Like, we all loved the beginning. We loved how it started, and then when it went into the kind of the fantasy part, it just kind of fell flat. And it seemed like every one of us, when we reviewed it, that's kind of what we said, and it was just
everybody starts good.
Yeah.
About halfway through, it gets kind of not so great. Yeah.
100%.
Under the Dome. It's one of the ones you really like, Josh. Yeah.
I do. In fact, we're talking about King. My next video is a Stephen King reading guide for basically either new readers or readers that have read a little bit that aren't sure where to go next. So,
I'm kind of like that as well. I've read The Dark Tower, which I've read it twice or 3 times and love it. I've read The Stand, and I've got it and Salem's Lot on my shelf, but haven't read them yet.
I've structured it by categories. So I talk about, because that's the thing with King, there's so much variety. So I have structured it like horror, magical realism, crime fiction, short fiction, nonfiction, that way. So that if people like a certain category, I've listed just kind of a short list of representative works that I think are a good spread, because it's so hard to recommend King. And I think a lot of it depends on the reader. So it's just kind of like a lot of different, just my thoughts on kind of the breadth of King. And then I talk about Dark Tower at the end as far as just the different ways you could read it. The 7 books. I have like a 7-book order, a 8-book order, 10-book order, and then like a 16-book order. So depending how deeply you want to go into the multiverse. So
all of the connected books. Yeah, that's why I bought Salem's Lot. I mean, most of Salem's Lot has been spoiled because I've read The Dark Tower a couple of times, but I'd like to read it. And I don't know. I've heard Insomnia is very connected, but it's also connected to the part I liked the least in The Dark Tower.
Me too.
So kind of don't really care that much.
I think Mike called Insomnia the most Dark Tower, non-Dark Tower book, because it felt like a Dark Tower book.
Okay, so it's a mess.
But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, there's a character that pops up in the last book of the Dark Tower that's in Insomnia, but it's not one of those essential ones.
Yeah.
But it does have some of the kind of the good weirdness of the Dark Tower in it.
Okay.
Yeah, my challenge with King is I've read the Dark Tower series. I've read Salem's Lot, 11/22/63, Pet Cemetery, and Fairy Tale. And now I don't, and I have I guess I do know what I need to read next. I need to read The Talisman because I own a copy of it, but I don't really want to read it because everybody says it's not that good.
That's exactly what I've heard.
I know, but it was a gift
from
one of my brothers. So
I'm going to reread that one soon because the that ties in. Talisman and Black House do tie into the Dark Tower.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
before I reread Dark Tower, I wanted to read all the peripheral stuff. So maybe this year, probably next year.
From everything that I've heard, and that's by basically one person, Kevin, there's no Stephen King book worse than Tommyknockers. So Talisman, you should be okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. Tommyknockers is probably, definitely a bottom 3.
But I haven't read The Stand. I haven't read it. And I haven't read, what's the other one I want to read? Misery. I want to read those.
The Stand is pretty cool for post-apocalyptic, if you like that
Which one
kind of
did you
thing.
read? Did you read the abridged one or the unabridged?
The unabridged. The reissued with the stuff he was forced to take out earlier version.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like that thick. It's huge.
Wow.
But it was good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, I know my brother who gifted me the Talisman, he said that he loved The Stand so much that he got to the end of how long that is, like 1,000 pages. And he said, I could have easily read another 1,000 pages. Like that's how much he loved The Stand.
Yeah, that's a book where you finish and you think about the characters, because it might be King's best character work. It may be.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them, but there's a lot of characters with a lot of depth that you finish that book and you wonder how they're doing after the book.
Yeah.
It being King, of course, you're the ones that are alive, because it's King. But you wonder, just wonder, how did that work out for them? How is that person doing? So, yeah, the character work is just incredible in that book.
There's a number of characters in it that you get very attached to, for sure. Yeah.
And I what I also love about the character work is, like, you ask anybody their favorite character in The Stand, and you'll get like 6 answers.
Oh, wow.
Because there's so many finely drawn characters, and everybody's right. I mean, everybody has a different character they love, and because they're just so vivid and so detailed. I mean, it's probably, if someone says it's Steve King's best work, I don't disagree with them.
Yeah.
Wow. And do you prefer the unabridged as well, Josh?
I do, because there were characters cut out in the abridged version, and I mean, some people that have read both say they like the abridged version better, but I'm of the mind that if I really like something, I generally prefer more of it. That's why I always prefer, like, if I see something's going to be adapted, I prefer it to be a television adaptation than a movie, because you're going to get more detail, you're going to get more. So yeah, I like the original, the uncut, the chunky doorstop version, rather than the one the editors made him cut 300 pages.
There were bits. I mean, I haven't read the abridged version to compare, but there were bits where I thought, okay, this is probably one of the bits that was cut out. There are some bits where it felt a little like, okay, we could get moving again sometime soon. It's a little bit fluffy and a little bit long. But overall, the book is not like that at all. It's just like there were a couple of bits where I was like, I bet if I was an editor, I would have cut this.
Yeah.
But yeah, once you're in it, it's one of those. It's a bit like Robin Hood in a way. Like, once you're into it, I can listen to Fitz and the Fool talk for 250 pages. I did. I mean, I read that book, and I have no problem with it. And by all normal metrics of reading a fantasy book, that's the worst thing that could ever happen, is 2 characters sitting in a hut talking. But
that's one of the best parts of the entire 16-book series.
Exactly.
Right?
I'm here for it. I'm totally here for it. Like, I have no problem with that. Whereas some books, like Jade War was almost entirely people sitting around talking, and I couldn't take it. I DNF'd it. I wasn't, I don't know. I didn't care. I hadn't gotten to the point where I cared that much about the characters that I wanted to hear them talk about economics. or maybe it was just what they were talking about. But in The Stand also, like, I got to a point where I was just like, you can show me any of these characters doing anything and I'm here for it. I'm hooked. I'm into it. So yeah, good. There were no spoilers there, Chadia. I'm maybe less sensitive to spoilers than some people, but mentioning something about a book is not a spoiler in my mind.
Yeah.
So,
Dialogue is a very particular thing for me. I think some authors do dialogue so well that I don't mind having quite a bit of it. But with some books, I do find like that can lose me as a reader a little bit if it's heavy, heavy, heavy dialogue.
I wonder if it's
Absolutely.
I wonder if it's mostly because of there's a lack of tension in the dialogue. Not that it's being bad, but like I feel like pacing and like narrative force or whatever is all about tension, whether that be in the action, in the prose, in the between characters. And I wonder if part of that is in the case of Jade War. Haven't read it, haven't even read Jade City. Is there wasn't really a lot of at least believable tension in those conversations.
it was also like, I have a very vivid imagination. Like in contrast to Josh, I see the book, like a movie in my head, and the characters. I see the characters. I get a real feeling for them, like they're people I know, and the people in the Greenbone saga, most of them are set up in the first book to be action heroes, and in the second book they talk a lot, and it just doesn't fit. And from the beginning, Fitz is set up to be someone who's in his head way too much. Like, he's an action hero, kind of, but he's not very good at it. And he's in his head a lot. And a lot of what's going on in the story is about his thoughts and his emotions, and it's first person, and you're in his head with him, So, like, him working through things by talking to someone is interesting and totally fits who he is and who he's been set up to be. Whereas in Jade City, it's like funky Hong Kong superheroes, and then Jade War, they all sit down and talk about economics a lot. And I'm like, okay, this isn't what I was expecting from these people.
I always find it interesting with dialogue too, how it's written. Like, it'll be in my next monthly wrap up. I read a book earlier this year that the writing style didn't work for me at all, because all of the dialogue was just boom, boom, boom. And I felt like I was reading a stage play. I hate when, it's one thing you can deliver exposition through dialogue, but you can do it in a way that doesn't feel like it's just back and forth like a tennis match, I love, and I've been very sensitive to that the rest of the month, and every other single author I've read this month, they artfully in the middle of a conversation are able to summarize things that are not dialogue that happen through the conversation, and it just, it tends to flow so much better. And yeah, for me, dialogue that actually takes me out of the story, because I just find it exhausting to feel.
Don't read
like
Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson.
Okay.
The whole entire middle section, that was my biggest complaint, is that our main character, hero protagonist, that's his name, which is kind of fun. Amazing beginning of the book, by the way. Incredible introduction to the characters. Amazing imagery. If you're somebody who visualizes what you read, lots of incredible imagery. Introduction to the metaverse. Amazing cyberpunk novel at the beginning. And then the whole middle section, like several chapters, chapter after chapter, is essentially a conversation between the protagonist, hero protagonist, and an AI librarian. And they explain all the history, all the analogies and allegories of everything. And it's really interesting in a heady way, but I just did not like the delivery via dialogue. It just killed characterization for me, because then suddenly hero just became like oh, well then this and this and this. Yes, but this and this and this. And it just, I did not care for that particular execution.
I read it when it came out, and I have no desire to reread it. Not because I didn't like it back then, but because to me it was such a novel of its time. Right? It's about near future stuff, and near future never works in the future.
It kind of did, though, oddly. It was actually pretty prophetic in some ways.
Yeah, but it's prophetic from in hindsight,
Yeah.
right? And at the time when he wrote it, it was just prophetic. It
Mhm.
was looking forward into a lot of future things that were really, really exciting at the time. I mean, I was just like the web only just started to exist. YouTube didn't exist yet. Google didn't exist yet. All of these things that have become just absolutely normal parts of our lives didn't exist when he wrote that book. And reading it then, when it was like, okay, the web exists now and we don't know what happens next, and it's like, could be anything, could change everything, could be like this, could be like that, it was really interesting to read at that time. But now when I imagine reading it, I imagine half of it would just be embarrassing how wrong it is, and the other half of it would be like, well, that seems obvious now, doesn't it? And I also I tried reading a couple more of his books, and heady is definitely a good description for everything I think he's written. And if you can get off on the nerdery, his stuff's brilliant. And I can't, and it's boring. Yeah, like he just has these huge passages where one of his books he goes into mathematics. I'm like, I didn't like mathematics when I had to do it. I don't want to hear about it in my fiction. Like, it's so boring. But there are particular kinds of nerds.
I have Quicksilver over here on the TBR shelf.
Maybe you'll love it. I mean, I know a lot of people who really like him, but I tried reading the Cryptonomicon, DNF'd it, and something else, which I can't remember. And they were just so nerdy, but in areas of nerdery that I'm just not into.
That's kind of how I felt with Snow Crash too. I thought that it was actually really brilliant, the way that he combined tech and religion and brainwashing and corporate surveillance rather than just government surveillance, which I think a lot of people talk about government surveillance, but I really love the corporate angle to that. So I think he did such an incredible synthesis of ideas in that book, and I still think they hold up as being brilliant and interesting. But it was just the execution, the way that he relayed the information in that manner. For me, like I said, it made characterization fall flat. And for me, like that's something I've actually thought about doing a video about, but I don't know. I don't know if I will exactly this way, but I feel like I love sci-fi, and a lot of people say sci-fi is about ideas. And I'm like, yes, yes. The best sci-fi books have some of the best, most brilliant ideas. Execution still matters. Narrative still matters. I'm not saying that every story has to have three-dimensional characters, but that kind of thing, or be plot driven or have like an intricate plot twist or whatever. But it has to have something going for it, I think, in the writing. For me personally, as a reader, it can't be just the idea alone. For me personally.
That's why I DNF'd 3 Body Problem.
Yeah. I'm worried about that now too.
I mean, I got 200 or 300 pages into it, and all I remember is there was a Chinese woman.
Oh no.
and lots of talk about physics. And
no, I know that series is not for me, so I'm not going to read it. I don't like hard sci-fi. I don't really
sometimes I do.
I don't like steampunk either. So like those kinds of things, there's not the area of sci-fi that I want to read. So I had a
hardcore
I know to steer away from
cyberpunk phase, like back when cyberpunk was the thing that was coming out regularly, and when it was kind of new. Like I read Neuromancer and all of Gibson's novels back then, and Terry Caldwell, who is a female cyberpunk author that it seems strangely forgotten because she wrote some really interesting stuff that mostly had to do with like technology influencing your actual brain and your dreams and your thoughts and stuff like that. Super interesting. I read a whole bunch of cyberpunk stuff back then, but like I said, most of it now you look at it and you're like, but they didn't have supercomputers in their pockets. It's kind of weird, isn't it? You know, it just all feels a bit odd. Like, I mean, one of my favorite cyberpunk really movies ever, Blade Runner, the first one, has held up strangely well. Like every time I watch it, and I've watched it many times, I'm surprised by how much of it you can still look at and think it's not super wrong. You know, that was an imaginable future. It's still an imaginable future. Like, we don't have flying cars. They didn't have supercomputers in their pockets, but it's an imaginable, very dark kind of soul-crushing future. That doesn't seem like it was imagining something that, I mean, the year, like at the beginning, it says, I think it's 2022. At the beginning, it says Los Angeles 2022. Obviously, like, our 2022 wasn't quite that bad. But yeah. Michael Swanwick. I have not read Vacuum Flowers by Michael Swanwick. But Cyberpunk was interesting. I mean, like you said, Joanna, I think the main interesting thing about it is that the enemy, the soul-crushing behemoth, is corporations. You know, that's sort of one of the main themes of Cyberpunk. It's not the government. It's corporations. And I think that was pretty prophetic. 2019, there you go. You can always count on Mac to know a detail about a thing that nobody else knows.
I mean,
so it was as
I guess that
not 2019 was just as bad as Blade Runner, right?
No, not quite. I've been to LA. It doesn't constantly rain in LA, and there is a sun.
What were you to say, Eevee?
I know. I was just gonna say, Blade Runner came out in '89, right? So it makes sense that Blade Runner 2049. It was 30 years later or thereabouts. Or yeah. So.
Yeah, exactly. The first movie was 30 years after when it was actually released, and then the second movie was set 30 years after the first movie. Yeah, both great, but I still stick by the first one. Like, the 2049 was all right, but the first one was genius.
First one I fell asleep during watching. To be fair, I was also watching at home, so
it's a slow and thoughtful movie. Strangely enough, yeah.
But I love 2049. It's so good.
Yeah,
it's funny. I like all that stuff on television or movies, but I don't like to read it as much. In fact, I would say probably as a television or movie viewer, sci-fi is probably my favorite.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of those I just don't like to read as much, especially like I said, steampunk, and I don't necessarily like real hard, heavy science in my sci-fi. I like more the lighter and the space operas and all that.
Yeah, and some, I mean, like Joanna said, like, sci-fi is more, I won't say it's more about ideas than fantasy, but it's more obviously usually about ideas than fantasy. And a lot of sci-fi authors, especially like the Golden Age dudes, like Asimov and so on, they just had the ideas. I'm sorry, Asimov couldn't write characters to save his life. Like, all of his characters are basically the same people, and they're very two-dimensional cardboard cutouts. But he's showing an idea, you know, and that's his point. And I'm much more interested.
I think Heinlein was a better writer, but I didn't like his ideas.
Heinlein wrote
I
much
thought he was
more.
a better writer, at least.
Yeah, he wrote much more interesting characters and much more interesting sort of adventure-ish stories.
Male characters, that is.
Well, male
True.
characters, yeah.
Yeah.
He
Female
sucked at
characters,
women.
not
That's
so
right.
much.
No,
Yeah,
that's true.
valid.
But yeah, knowing who he was and how he thought and what he thought about, that's not surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Foundation is basically just men smoking cigars in rooms. Yeah, kind of, and time jumps, big time jumps, not time travel, but time jumps. Yeah. Hyperion is not sci-fi from that time. Hyperion was written in the 80s, I want to say.
I think
Late
so.
80s, 88, 89, I think it came.
89 is what it says here in my book.
Yeah, and the guys I'm talking about, like Heinlein and Asimov and all of them, they were writing in the 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
They were much earlier. Mad Men in Space, yes.
I've
Smoking
heard there are
cigars.
controversial things about the author, but I don't really know.
He's kind of developed into a bit of a right-wing nut job, apparently. I haven't seen anything he said or did or anything directly personally myself. I've only heard it secondhand.
Same.
And it doesn't make the book bad. You know? I'm a separate the artist from the art kind of person.
Oh yeah. Yeah, me too.
Same.
As much as I can. Sometimes it's harder than others.
I mean, you
Sure,
can have a 2-hour argument with Raph about this, but you probably don't want to. I would say that, like, the right-wing nut jobness isn't in Hyperion. Raph has found some things and is, thinks that he is a bit of always was a bit of a right-wing nut job. Maybe he was. But I don't feel like it's in the book, Yeah, Daniel says he wrote Hyperion before any of that. I mean, he wrote it a long time ago. And apparently the right-wing nut job thing is just the last 10 years or something. I don't know. I don't know the details, and I kind of don't care. The book is insanely good. And that's it.
Yeah. I can't wait to read it. I'm excited. This was so fun.
It is good. It is so good.
So when are we getting to get together again to discuss our reads?
It's a bit up to our schedules. We could take over the pub again if you want, because I have a regular scheduled Sunday afternoon, but we can also just do it on one of your channels if you like. As you like. We haven't really planned it. We can chat about it in our channel and let everybody know. But I mean, we were talking about, because some of you are traveling, I think. We were talking about doing it in about 6 weeks, I think it was.
Yeah, I'll be out of the country till July 9th, I think. That's when I get back. So after that, I'm pretty much fine.
Yeah.
Where are you traveling to?
I'm chaperoning a student group from Central Texas, band, choir, orchestra, and it's 6 countries in Europe. We're doing kind of a concert tour that starts in London, and then we go into France, into Paris, Switzerland, Austria, brief stop in Liechtenstein, and then we fly home from Frankfurt. So
wow,
it's like
does that get
16-day
mostly
tour.
paid for through your school?
What's that?
Does that
No,
get
it's
mostly
separate. Yeah, it's separate from it's a. There used to be a national company called Voyagers that used to do this with groups from basically every state in the country. And what it used to be is through the summer, they just had continual tours, and it was kind of the summer concert series for like a lot of these little towns in Austria and Switzerland that we would play. And pandemic, they went bankrupt. Well, one of the people that did this in Texas just kind of reformed their own company and is kind of recreating the trip. So it's kind of a proven company, just under kind of a different leadership and a different name. And it's amazing. One of my colleagues that's also going said it's a incredible trip. You get to play at all these little small towns where they're just so appreciative of, the young musicians that we're bringing with us. And it should be a lot of fun. So yeah,
You
that's
should
gonna be fun.
talk to them, Josh, and convince them to play in the small town Berlin.
If only. I've been to Berlin once. I ran the marathon there in 2008, so it's been a while. But yeah, I love Berlin.
I have some very, very nice beer gardens we could go to. So if you can get one of those trips to come to Berlin,
Nice.
I'll set you up.
That sounds fun.
A friend of mine's an illustration professor in America, and he did this thing. Maybe he still does it. He did this thing where every year, for basically kids with rich parents, I think they would go to Florence. A group of like 20 kids from his university, they go to Florence, and he would teach them anatomy by drawing the sculptures. Donatello, Michelangelo, all these amazing sculptures that are everywhere in Florence. And I didn't know anything about it. And he called me up at one point and he was like, "What are you doing next month?" Like, not much. He's like, "I've got a flat with 3 rooms in it in Florence, paid for. All you need to do is get there." I was like, "I guess I'm spending half of next month in Florence."
Done.
Yeah, and it was so awesome. Like, he would go out every morning before I even wanted to get up and tour these kids through the museums for a couple of hours, and that was it. And then we had the rest of the day to do whatever the hell we wanted to in Florence. It's such an amazing city. It's my favorite city in Europe.
Wow.
Beautiful. So much art history there.
I need to go to Europe. I still have never been. It'll happen someday.
I'm an uncultured American, and I've never been outside of the continental United States, so I don't even have a passport.
Europe, yeah, I mean, I definitely, as someone from 2 young countries, America and Australia, Europe is so worth seeing because everything is older than your country, like hundreds of years older than your country. Yeah. It's so amazing. Like, I've gotten used to it now. But I mean, I used to live in a building that's older than America, but like, the first time I ever went to Europe, just looking around, you're like, how old is that? And people still live in it? Really?
Yeah.
It's really, really amazing.
I would love to go. I don't know why I haven't yet, but for whatever reason, I didn't really start doing a lot of international traveling until I met my husband. And now we're talking about for our next international trip going to Seychelles. So I don't know. That, or maybe I'll talk him into Europe though.
Yeah, it's totally Mac, I'm not going to Florence. This was years ago. This was something that happened a long time ago. But I will go to Florence again. It's just like I love it.
Yeah, Italy's probably top of my list of what I haven't seen in Europe.
Seeing the Europeans want to go to America.
Where do you live? Where does Jerome live?
I forget which city. Are you in Amsterdam, Jerome? He's in Netherlands, but I forget which city.
Nice.
Amsterdam's nice. If it wasn't so full of Dutch people. It's the only thing wrong with the Netherlands. Actually, a friend of mine.
That's what people say about Texas too. Texas is great if it weren't for the Texans.
A friend of mine used to say that about Switzerland. Actually, it's the most beautiful country in the world. If only it wasn't full of the Swiss. Leiden. Leiden is the German word for suffering.
Oh, geez.
Yes. It may also be, I mean, Dutch and German are pretty close together sometimes. It may also be the Dutch word for suffering. But yeah, I wouldn't want to live in a place called Leiden. It doesn't sound very attractive to me. Being suffering and all. No, Holland, Netherlands is nice. I've been there. That's the other thing is like when you live here, like saying you've been to Italy is like you saying you've been to New York or, you know, anywhere in America because it's just not that far away.
When Which sadly, I've never really spent time in New York. I feel like there's a lot of the US I still need to see. Like I've never been to the Grand Canyon or to New York. I've stopped in New York on a flight, but I've never really spent time there. So
New York has a lot more lasting interest than the Grand Canyon, but the Grand Canyon is worth seeing.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My brother and sister-in-law and sister-in-law just spent time in the Grand Canyon, took pictures. It looks so good. So amazing.
the first time I ever saw it, it was actually a really weird trip. My mother died years ago, and she said she wanted half of her, because she was an American from the East Coast of America who grew up or spent a lot of time, made her home eventually in Australia. She wanted to be cremated, wanted half of her ashes in the Pacific and half of her ashes in the Atlantic. So my stepdad, my stepbrother, and I went out on a boat near Sydney, put her half of her ashes in the water, and then we put the other half of her ashes in her favorite vase, took it to America, drove from California across to Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And put her ashes in the Atlantic. And on the way, my stepbrother and I decided to surprise my stepdad. And we organized a helicopter flight over the Grand Canyon. And he didn't know about it. So we're just driving across. And at some point, I just sort of turned and he's like, "Where are we going?" I'm like, "Take a nap. Just take a nap. Aren't you tired? Take a nap." And he figured it out, of course, before we got there. But we drove up there, and it was really interesting because, like, of course, the helicopter pads, they're not right on the edge of the canyon. They're a ways away. And when you take off, you fly over forest because there's a place where the forest goes right up to the edge of the canyon. And then all of a sudden, the forest drops away, and it's a mile down, and you're over the canyon. It's amazing. It's so beautiful. It's really, really, it's super worth seeing. Definitely worth seeing.
Yeah. I need to go someday. I need to go.
Yeah.
I love traveling.
Yeah, do it. It's definitely worth it. And come to Europe. There are so many interesting things to see over here.
I will. The only reason I put it off is because my mom's dream is to go back. I don't think she's been to Rome. Yeah, she wants to go to Rome. She's never been to Rome. And so we've been trying to organize a trip for years, but things keep coming up. So I've just been waiting on my mom and my sister to get things organized. And then I'll probably take a trip to Rome, Italy, and start there. And then probably try to visit some other places in Europe while I'm there.
Rome, I mean, speaking of like way too much history that's so much older than anything you've ever seen before. Rome is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been I was there when I was 16, I think. And I haven't been back to Rome. I've been back to Italy, but not Rome. And it's it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Definitely worth seeing. Do it. Don't
Love
wait.
traveling. Eevee, once you travel, you're just going to get addicted. It's so addictive.
I don't like flying, though. It's just, flying freaks me out.
Take a boat.
Yeah.
I don't have that much.
If you fly in a really nice plane, it'll change your mind about that. But
or if they just let me, take some legal drugs, just because it's on the internet, legal drugs, and let me pass out for the flight.
It's the way pass out, wake up in Rome. That's the way to do it.
I don't remember a single bus ride in India. Because in India, you can buy Valium over the counter.
Dang.
And you don't want to be in an Indian bus and not be on Valium.
Oh my goodness, Matt. You took Valium in India?
I had one bus trip in India. And after that, I was like, I'm never doing that again. And a friend of mine was like, "You don't know about the Valium?" And he took me to a drugstore. I mean, it's a proper store. It was just like they have different laws.
Over the counter, right?
And you just buy it over the counter.
Oh my goodness.
And I always had some Valium in my pocket whenever I got on a bus. Because getting on a bus, like I'm not a small guy. I'm like twice the size of a lot of Indians. and you get in a bus that was built in 1945, and there are already 80 people inside.
Yeah.
And I get in with my backpack, which is as big as an Indian. So it's me, my backpack is like 3 Indians, and I get in, and someone's got a chicken on their lap, and another guy's got a goat in the aisle, and a woman in the back is cooking on a burner. Like, all of this is exactly as it
I
happened.
love it. That's awesome.
Wow.
And then the roads are horrible, and the bus
Gosh.
always breaks down, and whatever. And you get in, you find a place to lean against someone, and you take a couple of Valium and wake up somewhere else. It's great.
That's
Best
funny.
way.
Oh my goodness. Never been to India. I don't know if I want to go to India or not. I know Anita's praised it quite a bit. Like, said there were some beautiful places to go.
Totally.
Maybe someday. Mhm.
It's an amazing country, but there's 2 ways to, like, if you don't have friends there, there's 2 ways to travel in India, and it's either backpacking or spending a lot of money. And spending a lot of money, you don't actually see India, so it's a lot
Right.
more comfortable.
Mhm.
Like, you stay in clean places, and you get good food, and you stay in hotels where you don't have to see the beggars and that kind of thing. And I met people who were doing that, and I was like, why are you even here? You can do that anywhere.
Yeah.
The real India is dragging a backpack through muddy streets and being chased down streets by cows and getting ripped off by taxi drivers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds great. That
Yeah.
sounds great to me.
But like I said, there are things to see in India, and also people I met. Like, the Indian people are amazing.
Oh, I believe
And
that.
it's unique. I've traveled a lot, and I've never been anywhere even similar to India.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, it's a crazy place, but it's really, really interesting.
They do have it.
Fascinating.
I know Indian inspired stuff is very beautiful, exotic, and rich and fascinating. So
Yeah,
I could believe that for sure.
yeah. And I don't. I'm glad I went to India like over 20 years ago, when I was a lot younger. I don't think I'd want to be carrying that backpack around anymore, and climbing up on top of buses and up and down stairs all over the place and that kind of thing. I was a lot younger and fitter when I was in India, and I think that was good. Yeah, exactly what I just said, Chadia. It's fun when you're 20. I was 28. But yeah, no, I don't think I'd want to do that kind of thing anymore. Yeah. Anyway, we've been at it for a couple hours. It's been fun. Thank you all very much. I look forward to reading Boy's Life.
As do I.
Period.
Yeah.
Yay.
I'm excited. It's there's a certain kind of freedom in someone else deciding for you.
I like
Yeah.
it.
But also
Big
pressure.
fan.
I was literally, like, yesterday I was getting towards the end of this, and when I put it down, I was like, damn, what am I going to read next? And I couldn't decide. There are so many things I couldn't decide. And then I remembered we were going to be doing this. I was like, I don't have to decide. That's good.
Yeah. That's one advantage of TBRs in general. And one reason I kind of like having a loose base TBR. I like picking up books on a whim, but it's also nice to know, okay, these are books I have to read so that I don't get into the overwhelm and decision fatigue trying to figure it out.
So often when I've tried to have, like, okay, I'm reading these things in the next 2-3 months, I get to that book I'm meant to be reading, and I'm just not in the mood for it, or I'm super excited about something else, or whatever. So generally I do like just pick up whatever. Like, I wasn't planning on reading Men at Arms. I was just I feel after Ishiguro, I feel like something a little funny.
Good
Yeah.
contrast. Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I was going to plan to read Lonesome Dove this summer, and I still want to, but it's hard because I'm a little more in the mood right now for something like Ishiguro, or so there's something very different. So I don't know.
When you feel like getting to Lonesome Dove, I've also got it on my list.
Yeah, let's
My-
do it. Let's just
My
do it.
vague list. Yeah.
Let's just do it this summer.
Maybe after this.
Maybe after this. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
is
I know-
due
I
on
know-
the range for westerns.
That's right. Might
Exactly.
start it at the end of June, actually. Just
I
to-
know that Tori also wants to read it.
Mm.
And who else was I talking to? I think Darko was also saying he
cool.
wanted to read it.
Okay. Yeah.
In the read-alongs channel on the Fireside.
Okay.
We were talking about it a while ago. So maybe we could get together a slightly larger read-along.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Let's go ahead and just start it. Open it in
Yeah.
June, and I might get to at the end of June, but we'll just make it a summer event because I know it's a massive tome.
It's thicker than my copy of It.
That's pretty thick.
And they're the same height, and they're both paperbacks, but it's slightly thicker than It.
Does it read
It doesn't.
fast?
It
Josh?
doesn't feel. It doesn't feel long though.
No,
It's,
no.
yeah. No. It's.
I
It's
expect it would.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Very
well,
much looking forward to it. But yeah, you definitely have to pick up some Ishiguro
I will.
soon. I think, knowing you, I think you will like it. Just from reading Never Let Me Go, I just immediately was like, okay, I want to get a pale view of Hills and see if I stay as into him as I am now. But I think I will.
You know, it's a good author because I looked up this author last year. Actually, was when I first saw Never Let Me Go and some other books recommended by this author. And I actually found a couple of videos on YouTube, on BookTube, channels I don't necessarily follow, honestly, but I found a couple of channels where they were ranking every single one of his books because they loved all of his books so
Right.
much. And
Yep.
you know, it's a good author when different people rank them in a different order, which was the case
Yeah.
that I found.
Yeah, it's one of the things I also think about Malazan. Like
Mhm.
everybody has a different ranking of the 10 books.
Yeah.
Everybody has different favorite characters. You know, there's so much richness and variety in there. I'm really interested. I've been thinking actually I should do a ranking of Paul Auster's novels because I have read almost all of them. All of them except 4321, which I'm just looking at it on the shelf right now. 4321 is his latest, possibly or definitely last novel. He died last week, 2 weeks ago. It's as thick as any four of his other novels. It's so weird. And that one I haven't read, but everything else I think I've read. And yeah, I've also heard it's great, Matt, but it's chunky. Paul Auster for me is like, I can reread one of those in between something else because they're all pretty small, but they're awesome stories. But anyway, when I get back to making videos, maybe I'll do a Paul Auster ranking video after I read 4321.
Sounds good. Well, thank
Anyway.
you, Matt. Thanks for hosting, and thank
Yeah.
Thanks
you
for hosting, Matt. Yeah.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Pleasure. Glad you could join us last minute, Eevee.
Yes.
I
Thank you
look
for
forward.
the tasks
Yeah.
in the books.
I look forward to hearing what you think of these books and what we all think of these books. And everybody in the chat, we will announce on the Fireside when we know exactly. It'll be around 4 or 5 weeks, maybe. We will do a follow-up stream where we talk about the books we've read. We will let you know. Otherwise, the pub, as usual, is back to an hour later than when this started, wherever you are, 8 p.m. in Berlin, 2 p.m. EST. Pub will be back as normal next Sunday at that time, and we will see you then.
Oh, and also are we
Yeah.
done? Sorry.
No,
I just
go
want to
ahead.
make one more request
Yeah.
for anybody
Yeah.
still listening. If you're in the Fireside, would you please let us know in each of our sections what book you would have chosen for us? And let us know also what book you would choose for Eevee too. Because I'd be curious if people chose, if we had the viewer's choice, or if there was a different choice that anybody had for any one of us.
I will say then, each of us will post our list of 10 books in our
Sections.
personal
Mhm.
channels. And yeah, that'd be really cool. So go in our channels and find our list and tell us what you would have picked. Obviously, I mean, it's cheating a little bit. I thought it was funny with the grimoire because the guys, when they did it, they just picked no list, no, I already own it, no, I know I want to read it. Like, we were pretty safe. Like, I had a list of 10 books I wanted to read, and you could have told me to read any of them because I want to read all of them, you know, so not that risky. But yeah, no, it'd be fun. Go in our channels, find our list of 10, and tell us what you would have picked. And I will see you next week, Sunday, in the pub. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.